Managed Mentoring Guide for Getting Started in Beekeeping. Things you will see. I am Kevin England. In this lesson, we'll go over beekeeping visuals, what new bees, drone bees, worker bees, brood looks like, honey stores, pollen, capped honey, and so on. We're going to take you through a bunch of pictures so that as you do your hive inspections, you know what you're looking at and know what to look for. One of the things we see with new beekeepers when we bring them out into the field is they're constantly looking at the interior of the hive and asking, what is that? How does that work? What does it do? Why is that way? And so on. And I love to do a representation through photos. All of these photos are mine, and I take them all the time. It's one of the things I would encourage you to do as a beekeeper is bring your phone out with you or bring somebody with a camera, suit them up, and take a lot of pictures because the post debrief that you have of your hive inspections will tell you a lot when you have the time to stop and stare at some of the photos. We hope you enjoy this tour. In this lesson, we'll take you through a series of detailed photographs and elements you will encounter in a honeybee hive. As we move through, we'll give you a few important points to consider for the item being covered. When we're done, we'll cover just about everything you're going to encounter along the way as you get started in beekeeping. This will be the first of two parts. Part 1 will focus on bees and honeycomb elements. Part 2 will cover honey bee behaviors and some other management practice observations that you need to know about. Let's get started. We start our journey by looking at the bees. The most common bee in a hive is the female worker. Color and sizes vary from colony to colony and from bee to bee. Bees can be yellow, tan, dark brown, and a mixture thereof, sometimes even in shades of gray. They can be long and slender, small, large in size and shape. There could be wide variances within a single colony's population. Workers are aptly named, as they are found everywhere the bees are and doing some job in support of the functions of the colony. Next up, we have the drones. These are the male bees in the hive. The queen starts to lay eggs for the drones early in the spring, and they are going to be present in the hive until late fall. They are found in and around the hive, walking on the comb amongst the worker bees. Oftentimes, they will take refuge in the periphery of a very active hive, resting in between their voyages out for hive mating flights. You can spot a drone by their long barrel-like shape, larger size, and large eyes on the top of their head. One of the things to note about drones is they do not have stingers. If you touch one or one lands on you, you have no concern of being stung. There is one queen to a hive, and oftentimes you will find her somewhere in the brood nest performing her primary function, laying eggs. She has a characteristically long abdomen, and her thorax is often larger than a normal bee, and that provides a good visual to spot her. Of course, the bee in the photo has a white dot painted on her thorax. The queen is often in the area where the brood is being produced, but the truth is she could be anywhere, so use caution whenever making entry into the hive. As your population grows, it will of course have new bees. You will likely encounter a bee emerging from a cell at some point during your inspections. New bees emerge from the cell as an ivory-colored bee. Sometimes they look matted and fragile as they come to the surface. They will typically beg for food from a worker and then return to their cell, starting in on their transformation by hardening their surfaces and wings. In mere hours, they will take to some task and start their journey to become a contributing member of the colony's population. Honeycomb is the heart of the hive. Bees will build out honeycomb through a mix of genetics and influences. Some colonies will make the dimensions of the cells larger in size. Others will trend towards smaller dimensions. There's a whole dynamic to this that we're not going to cover at the moment, but it is worth noting that we influence the size of the cells by the substrates we start them on, namely the foundation. As we will cover in a moment, the bees have many purposes for the base of their home. One that might not be initially known is how wax plays into the atmosphere and operation of the hive. it holds moisture, it holds heat. The bees transfer signals through vibrating it. There are a lot of examples of how honeycomb is an integral part of colony operation. Following our logic of three types of comb, honeycomb, worker comb, and drone comb, the most prevalent of the constructs is worker comb. Worker comb is transformed into quote-unquote worker comb if the queen lays an egg in the cell. Worker development results in a cocoon which is left behind when the bee emerges from the cell. This changes typical honeycomb due to the remnants left behind. This is a depiction of a typical frame with capped worker comb. Its color is not too different from the color of a typical brown paper bag. Underneath each of the capping is a bee in development. The worker caps developing bees with a mix of materials but mostly wax. It is of course found in the brood nest, and when it's well formed it's contiguous like the image in the upper left. When a full frame of capped worker comb is seen, it is sometimes referred to as a carpet of brood. This is a great sign as it means plenty of bees in your future. As mentioned a moment ago, as beekeepers, we impact the size of the cells being created due to the foundation we install. Foundation sheets, plastic or wax, influence the size of the cells in a somewhat artificial way. If you were not to use foundation, it would likely be that bees would build a higher percentage of larger cells for both nectar storage and drone production. It is transformed into drone comb when the queen lays an unfertilized egg in the cell for a drone. Like a worker, the production of a bee results in a cocoon embedded in the wax and the cell being transformed from a simple wax cell to a drone brood cell. Drone cells are often produced in the margins, and you can also find them on the lower sides of the frames. It is often common for the bees to place drones in any extra spaces they can find, including on top of and below the frames, because of the artificial influence we have of trying to drive bees to build a lot of worker comb. If you find broken cells with exposed larvae when inspecting hives, oftentimes it is fractured drone brood cells built in the margins. Capped drone comb differs from worker comb in that the cappings have slight domes to them and they cover cells that are a little bit deeper than a conventional worker cell because drones are bigger. Drone comb can be found in contiguous swaths across the face of a whole frame or just about any place that the bees might find to build drone comb in the margins. When the colony is hosting drones, you will find operational drone comb. During the later stages of the year, the production of drones tapers off and drone brood will not be present in the hive. Emerging brood comb is more of a visual condition of the life cycle of the hive. The bees emerging will come out in the order that they were placed in the cell by the queen, first in, first out. Often this will appear as is depicted in the image on the slide. A hole will form in a large swath of capped brood, and the bees will often get to work cleaning out those cells in anticipation of the queen returning and laying another cycle of eggs during the brood rearing periods. This is a very normal operation of the hive. One last comb condition to cover in this lesson. It's more about comb that is capped for the purposes of sealing in honey for storage. As the slide says, bees cap off ripened honey, the term for when nectar is dried to a proper moisture. When they want to hold honey in storage for future use, the capping is made of a thin layer of wax and serves to encapsulate the honey in the cell. Bees will uncap the honey as needed to gain access to the food below when the times call for it. Queen cups are a specialty cell created by worker bees in anticipation of queen replacements. They are not indicators of queen replacements. They are created by the workers in something similar to an insurance policy. They are often present on the comb and more so during nectar flows. In the true nature of a queen cell, they are often created with an opening that points the cell towards the bottom of the hive. Generally, they're not a concern and only of interest if they are charged with a cell. As an aside, one can often tip up the top box when you get to 2 boxes and look upon the queen cups along the bottoms of the frames to see if they're charged in one pass. Queen cells, however, are a sign that the colony intends to replace the queen. They are created for a number of reasons as indicated on the slide. Proper queen cells, meaning the ones the colony built on purpose, are placed by the colony and populated by the queen. In the case of emergencies, a regular cell could be transformed into a queen cell when picked by the bees for the purpose of replacing the queen. A queen cell is considered a queen cell when charged and will eventually be capped, such as the ones pictured in the images. In 16 days, a charged queen cell will emerge, possibly with some help of workers who will chew off the ends of the capping so that the queen can have an easier go at it for emerging. There are 2 cells shown in the image. The one on the right is still sealed. The cell on the left is typical of a queen cell from which a queen has emerged. If you see this in your hive, it is likely that you have a virgin queen somewhere on the honeycomb. We're now going to turn the corner to resources stored in the hive. The first one is pollen. Pollen storage is simply collected pollen from bees placed in the cells. Beekeepers often call processed pollen by the bees in the cells bee bread. This is in deference to the way that the bees process the pollen for storage, something for another lesson. Pollen is often stored around the developing brood on brood frames and on frames just outside of the working brood nest. If you encounter a pollen frame, such as what is shown, it is likely that the next frames nearby will have brood in development as you work your way through your hives for inspections. Nectar stored in the comb looks quite wet. It could appear water white, light yellow, or even hues of amber. It looks wet when placed in the colony, but is held in the cell by tension and because the cell has a slight tip upwards. One should use care when turning the frames over, as some of the hard work of the bees could be lost when the nectar pours out of the cells when turning over during inspections. The upper left image shows a mature nectar that has been dried by the bees and is closer to ripened honey, taking on the glassy appearance in the cells. This can be turned over with little risk. It could be noted that if you are feeding the bees a sugar solution, it is not very discernible from nectar which was collected by the bees. This is something to keep in mind during honey harvesting seasons. Honey in the honeycomb becomes honey when the nectar within is dried of moisture. The lower part of the image shows honey on the verge of being capped. It has the classic marble glass appearance. Above that is newly capped honey, and it is likely that this frame was one that had overwintered honey still at the top, and as the season is progressing, the bees are refilling the comb that was consumed by the bees on the overwinter. The comb at the top shows capped honey that has been in service for some time, and likely the bees walked upon it. These differences were shared here to show you that the appearance of capped honey changes over time, in the same way that new honeycomb eventually transforms into dark mahogany brown in color. This wraps up part 1 of a 2-part feature on things you will see. In this lesson, we focused on comb and resources. In part 2, we'll take a different focus on things you'll see, more along the lines of what bees do while maintaining the colony, and we'll share some visuals of behaviors of the bees. We hope this was helpful and share that the second part is equally as valuable when it comes to things you will see, so please make the time to watch both videos and come back to the slides to take in the information shared. We hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you have questions, you can ask at our next online session. You can also send an email to the address on the slide. If you're watching from YouTube, you can leave a comment below. Hover over the video and click on the YouTube link if you're watching from our website. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the next lesson.